These days, it seems like every game publisher and their mother wants to get acquired. Little fish wants to get eaten by big fish, and the latest report suggests that EA might be looking to sell. So this was first reported by news outlet Puck, which talks about Brian Roberts, one that got away. He is, I believe, the CEO of Comcast, and in this article, there's information relayed about talks that EA had with NBC Universal, whose parent company is Comcast, to get acquired by the company, but also EA has been, just in general, talking to a number of potential candidates to acquire the company, to act as the big fish to eat the little fish. Not to say that EA is necessarily a small company, but compared to the likes of Comcast, yeah, EA could easily get acquired by a company of that stature. Now, this article from Puck requires you to pay to read the rest of it, so we're going to take a look at this Kotaku article that summarizes that information, and the headline speaks for itself. Report, EA looking to sell or merge. And it is reported here that beyond talking to NBC Universal and considering a merge with NBC Universal, the gaming publisher has also been in talks with a number of other prominent companies like Disney, Apple, and other companies. Apple in particular has been trying to delve into the gaming market, with iOS in particular, with mobile gaming, but they're probably looking to expand understanding just how big the gaming industry is getting. And when it comes to Disney, they've obviously licensed out a lot of their IPs to be made into video games, be it Marvel games or be it Star Wars games, you name it. EA and Disney in particular have that relationship because for some time EA had exclusive publishing rights to Star Wars. Thankfully, recently that became null and void, and now a number of companies are working on Star Wars games. EA was running Star Wars games into the ground. They just weren't releasing them frequently enough, and the ones that they did release, aside from maybe Jedi Fallen Order, they just were so cynical in their monetization intention that they ultimately ended up ruining the potential of release games like Star Wars Battlefront 2, one of the most prominent examples. Now, it does say right here that a deal isn't currently in the works, which means that talks are still very much preliminary. It's still a lot of considerations rather than official talks, but it is emphasized that it doesn't sound like EA plans to give up anytime soon. So this is a quote directly from the Puck article that reads, "In recent years, as media companies have taken greater interest in the rapidly growing gaming industry, Wilson and Electronic Arts have held talks with a number of different potential suitors, including Disney, Apple, and Amazon. Amazon in particular has been making major pushes towards becoming a game publisher, and their previous projects have failed pretty epically, though more recent projects that they've published, like Lost Ark, which still has hundreds of thousands of players playing after its February 2022 launch, and titles like New World, which garnered an all-time peak of almost 1 million, though that player base has diminished quite a bit, they've proven to be more successful releases. Now, unlike the less successful New World, which was funded and developed internally at Amazon, Lost Ark is a game that Amazon got publishing rights to, but they didn't actually make the game. The developers are a South Korean company. So when it comes to internally developed games, I still wouldn't say Amazon has proven itself as a prominent threat to the gaming landscape, but they are certainly trying to get there, and a purchase of a major company like EA would certainly bolster their games development portfolio and their games publishing portfolio. Though that's just one of the candidates. According to Kotaku here, it was apparently a deal with NBC Universal that got the farthest along. Apparently, Comcast CEO Brian Roberts' plan was to look to spin off the entertainment conglomerate into a separate entity with EA, with one version of the deal leaving current CEO Andrew Wilson in charge of the new mega business. Negotiations eventually fell apart over price, however. So yeah, unlike Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick, who does not have much in the way of negotiating power because of all the controversy surrounding Activision Blizzard, the fact that Bobby Kotick let a culture of harassment, abuse, misconduct, and discrimination fly for decades and did nothing about it, and people just want him out of the company, EA CEO Andrew Wilson hasn't gotten into enough trouble that it would be a likely prospect for him to depart from the company should some kind of merger or a sell-off of EA happen. He would likely still remain head of EA. Unfortunately, that's a damn shame. I would love to see a leadership shakeup because it is my belief that Andrew Wilson is just not a good leader for EA. He stifled and diminished the potential of a number of game releases and IPs. So much of his emphasis is on live services and monetization and surprise mechanics, as he likes to call loot boxes, and microtransactions and all of these things that just, completely tarnish the artistry of game making and the integrity of game design and all of these things that have just completely ruined so many of EA's latest releases. But it would seem as though whatever negotiations do happen when it comes to an EA merger or an EA sell-off will involve Andrew Wilson ultimately staying at the head of EA. Now, as far as NBC Universal is concerned, they've also licensed their IPs to be turned into games. A lot of the games that they've put out are mobile games. You can see their portfolio listed here on their official website, or rather the official website of Universal, or universalbranddevelopment.com, which is obviously under the umbrella of NBC Universal, which is under the umbrella of Comcast. Most of this stuff just isn't appealing at all. I know there's some excitement surrounding Jurassic World Evolution 2, but on the other hand, you've got stuff like Fast and Furious Crossroads, which failed epically. So yeah, overall, there's just not much to write home about when it comes to NBC Universal's collection of games and IPs that they've licensed out to be made into games. So they're likely looking to bolster that aspect, with the gaming industry being so lucrative financially, and a purchase of a major company like EA could certainly bolster their gaming division in the long term. But for now, that deal seemingly fell apart because the asking price of EA was just, too much. Now, when EA was reached out by Kotaku for a statement, they basically said, "We don't comment on rumors and speculation relating to M&A," followed by more typical PR fluff that ultimately says nothing. So what do I think about the prospect of EA selling off the company? Well, on one hand, I do think that EA is in dire need of accountability and leadership that can just stir things up a little bit within the company, just make it run better, and actually emphasize the integrity of game making rather than prioritizing monetization. But so far, the prospects that are being presented, companies like Amazon and Disney and Apple and NBC Universal, those are not companies that I associate with gaming. These are not companies that I feel confident would be able to transform EA into a better game publisher. With the candidates presented so far, this feels more like a sidestep for EA rather than a step forward for the company's future. It just ultimately feels like not a whole lot would change, except for EA maybe having more access to IPs and franchises that belong to whatever major company like Disney, Apple, Amazon, and NBC Universal would be able to license out to EA now that EA is a part of that company, should the deal go through. So they'd be able to have access to more IPs to make games out of and whatnot. But as far as leadership goes and management and what they prioritize and just releasing better games that emphasize integrity, artistic integrity, and design integrity, and, just actually putting out there the best effort, something that customers will genuinely want to pay for, rather than something that they'll have to see as a potential minefield rife with, manipulative monetization elements. That's where I'm just less optimistic when I see the candidates that are displayed here. And these are candidates that are trying to break into the gaming market rather than being established gaming companies that are acquiring studios and publishers to be able to bolster them. It just feels like they just want to get in and get a piece of the pie. And so it just doesn't feel like these are companies that would be able to manage gaming as well as one would want. Amazon, for example, they try to make a major push into gaming, and we've seen all of their failures because they just don't know how to manage game studios. A lot of these companies don't understand how different it is to manage game studios and game companies, and the amount of flexibility that they require. It can't be too regimented of a work structure. You have to give them enough freedom to play around with ideas and to find the fun. There's just no exact recipe to find fun. It's something you have to play around with and feel around for. And that's something that companies like Amazon and Google have trouble understanding. And NBC Universal, having little experience in the gaming landscape, like direct involvement in game publishing and development, I wouldn't feel like they'd fare much better because they just don't have that experience. But ultimately, this is just me speculating and a gut feeling based on what we know about these companies. it just doesn't seem all that ideal. It doesn't seem like it's going to be much of a shift, except for the access that EA is going to have when it comes to certain IPs and franchises that belong to some of these parent companies. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where this lands in this landscape of acquisitions. Recall that Take-Two recently announced that they were buying Zynga for $12.7 billion. Microsoft, of course, announced that it was planning to buy Call of Duty maker Activision Blizzard for $69 billion. That's on top of the ZeniMax Bethesda purchase that was also billions of dollars. Sony recently bought Bungie for $3.6 billion. The irony of Bungie once upon a time having been this flagship studio for Xbox and now being a Sony PlayStation studio. And then recently we also saw that Embracer bought a bunch of these Square Enix, or formerly Square Enix studios, Crystal Dynamics, Eidos Montreal, and Square Enix Montreal for dirt cheap $300 million, given just how many IPs this deal comes with. So yeah, it's just been acquisitions galore, and it would seem as though EA is also prime for a potential sell-off. Though which big fish will eat this littler fish, hard to say for now, though Kotaku does note that Wilson approached Disney as recently as March in pursuit of what sources described as a more meaningful relationship than licensing deals. And given that EA already has a relationship with Disney because of deals like exclusivity publishing rights for Star Wars and whatnot, maybe that's a scenario that will play out. Maybe that's the more likely scenario after talks with NBC Universal fell through. But in the end, only time will tell. For now, this is everything we know, and I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on who you think will ultimately acquire EA. Who do you think EA will sell the company to? And what do you think this means for EA's future? Do you see this as a potentially positive thing, or are you more sort of in my side of the fence, where I see this more of like a shift to the side rather than a step forward? At the end of the day, what I hope for is a brighter future for a company that, again, I think could really use some new leadership. But that's my take. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.